to invite to an interactive discussion about the future of the Middle East. As we heard earlier on in the speeches and from the presidents, the Middle East has also, the last years, enjoyed quite substantial economic growth. President Mubarak underlined that Egypt this year is facing 7% economic growth, and this is important for a region having more than 60% of its populations as young people. It has to be created more than 20 for the 20 coming years, it has to be created more than 90 million jobs in the Middle East. So there are huge opportunities that one can capitalize on, but at the same time one are facing obstacles like water shortage, security issues, and also for some of the Middle East countries, in fact, higher oil prices. Other countries are accumulating capital, are discussing how can one use this capital in a sustainable way so one can increase the wealth creation in the future. And of course, we cannot be in this country without also addressing the issue of rising food prices. I have a very distinguished panel here, and I would like to start with Mr. Alshaya. He is a very seasoned retailer in the Middle East and also started to investing in East Europe. Looking at the possibilities for the Middle East in the years to come, slowing down U.S. economy, is it possible for the Middle East to decouple? What are the main obstacles for enhancing entrepreneurship and innovation and growth in the years to come, seeing it from your viewpoint as a successful businessman?
Thank you. I come from a very difficult industry to attract people to work in. Retail is not a very interesting and promising to the youth, and we're trying to change that. We're trying to invest in the training and in the education, invest in the teachers and the trainers to train, and I see some hope in some of the countries we're working in. Your question about the potential of the Middle East, I'm very optimistic currently on the potential. We have unsurpassed liquidity and funds that are chasing opportunities to invest in. The Middle East will have the largest airlines in the world, the largest airports. It's a mix of tourism to financial centers, to logistics, and all of these sectors will require people. I think the key message we have to address to both private and public sector is to be partners. Governments has to shrink. It's too fat in the Middle East. They have to let go. They have to privatize. They have to be allowing entrepreneurship, attract talent into public enterprise and turn them around to become a magnet for skilled people and to grow beyond, not necessarily where I come from the Gulf. So I see a key strategic is to deploy all these funds into countries, emerging economies like Syria, Morocco, Egypt, Tunisia, where they have the culture, the antiquities, the weather. Sharm el-Sheikh, you see, and it's a good example of how it has become a global destination for tourism. And tourism, retail, and services, hospitality, is the largest employer in any economy.
Thank you. As I was saying, one needs to create 90 million jobs for the young people in the Middle East in the years to come. Do you think one will be successful in doing so, or is it also, as you're saying, a prerequisite to a more lean, less bureaucratic government?
I think we can do it. I think if there is the will of the leaders to change, to reform, I think also we have to invest in the institutions and the training centers that train people to do things themselves. They roll out the sleeve and go to the shop floor and service the customers and serve coffee, help them in all aspects of service. But this has to change mindset. And it's a strategy between private sector and the government. Why from Morocco to Oman we can't be the biggest destination for tourism in the world? Why Spain has 60 million people visiting and Egypt has only 9 or 10? And that's a question we have to ask for both the private sector and the government. And the government has to address the issues that makes it possible to attract tourism and inward investment and to enhance employment.
Just shortly, have you seen this kind of structural changes taking place already in the region?
Yes, I have seen, and I have seen progress. I have seen progress very much in Egypt, not because we are here in Sharm el-Sheikh, but that's true. We have seen more efficiency and more productivity. In fact, we have Egyptian youth and young that are now working with us and working with us beyond Egypt. So I have seen, and we are working with the non-government agencies and also the government to improve on the skills of the youth and to make them consider it as a career for them.
Thank you very much. Your Royal Highness, you're the representative of your government in trade and also enhancing investments, and have been doing a lot of traveling in this region, and you also have seen some of the challenges that business is facing when it comes to investing and trading with the Middle East. What would your sir's advices be to even strengthen the growth for this region?
That's a very big question.
That's why you got it, sir.
You asked me that question. I think there are a number of competing problems that you have here, and the first thing to say is that I think that you need a partnership between government and the private sector. We've already heard that is possible. I then think that the governments of this region then need to set the conditions in order for business to be able to flourish and to grow. And by that I mean, I think the sort of things that it's the control of inflation. It's creating the conditions whereby private enterprise can create jobs, because you have a rapidly growing young population. The requirement for 90 million jobs over the next, whatever it is, 20 years or so, is a very, very difficult order. I think then the next thing that is probably going to help business grow and to build is for an absolutely world-class education system, starting at primary school, working through secondary school and into the university area. But they've got to cover not only the education from the neck up, it has to cover the education of the person in terms of having a skill, the ability to actually do things. We have a problem in the UK sometimes when people go to university and think that they can step straight out of university and become a designer, be it a clothing designer or a web designer. The fact is that you actually do need to learn actually what it means to be skilled in how to do that job before you can become a designer, even though you've had an education in design. So it's that progression all the way through. Then I think that there are areas of concern where business needs to work in partnership and needs to be aware of problems that government have. And I think that the high oil price is one where it's going to slow growth down to some extent, in the sense that price is meaning that people are going to be doing less because they haven't got as much money to spend. Of course, in this region, we cannot avoid the political uncertainties, and I think they will continue, and I think it's got to be something that is focused on not only this year, but into the future, because I think that the more talking that is done, the better. We've seen a couple of areas, or there are a couple of areas where I think that we will probably have problems in the coming years. One is with the food, the amount of food that we can produce, the population of this planet. We only have one planet, and we've got to sustain the development of that so that we can actually live on it and feed ourselves. We've seen the problems that have taken place, particularly in Egypt, over food riots in the not so distant past. I'm afraid I think that this is an area where we're going to have to work really, really hard to resolve. And the other area which has not yet hit us, but I think might well hit us in the not too distant future, is scarce water resources. And water resources, particularly in North Africa, I think is an area where we need to be more and more conscious. But there is, as I come back to it, a partnership to be had between business and governments, and I think also the voluntary sector, in order to be able to achieve what we want, which is more growth, which will allow more people to share in that prosperity of globalization.
Thank you very much, sir. Coming to the water, I just saw some figures showing that half of the hospital beds in Africa was really occupied by people because of water-related diseases, and this is unfortunately staggering numbers. If I understood rightly, education is definitely important, and also to mitigate the negative parts of the security issues. So on the security situation, how do you, sir, look at the possibilities for reducing that as one of the main obstacles for future growth in the region?
By that you mean, do we have to reduce the risk of
we're seeing that the security situation is difficult in the Middle East in general. And what can we do to mitigate it or reduce it?
I don't think the security threat is, or the security issues are general throughout the Middle East and North Africa. I think that there are specific areas and there are specific activities that are going on in certain parts of that area that are increasing the risk not only to growth but also to business and the free flow of economic activity. And I think that we've got to do all we can in order to be able to alleviate certainly some of the poverty that is around, but the way to do that is to be constructive, continue the dialogue, but by doing that you are going to therefore improve the trust, the confidence measures in each other's communities, and thereby allow people the confidence to be able to go back into the workplace. So yes, essentially, you have to reduce the risk of conflict in order for business flows to take place.
Thank you very much. Ms. Koike, you're the former Minister of Defense and also Minister of Environment in Japan. And is it good to be back in Egypt?
Of course. And may I speak in Arabic?
Yeah.
هذا الشرف عظيم لي لأحضر هذا المنتدى كرئيسة المشتركة الوحيدة من منطقة آسيا. شكرا. Can I continue 2 more sentences?
Yeah, indeed. Am I that tough?
أعتقد معظم الناس بيفكر إن آسيا يعني بعيد جدا من شرق الأوسط جغرافيا وتاريخيا ودينيا، ولكن في الحقيقة يعتبر الشرق الأوسط وآسيا إخوة ينتمون سواء إلى المشرق. صحيح? I think I better stop by now.
Thank you very much. You did wonderful. And
Thank you.
And we know that you also, I read in the papers, you're not only then in the papers it said that you could be the first female prime minister of Japan, but you definitely will have an unbeatable record if you're successful. And so the first female Japanese and Arabic-speaking Japanese prime minister. Looking at the situation now in the Middle East and also in Japan, how do you foresee the cooperation between your country and the Middle East in the years to come? Will we see more Japanese investments going to the Middle East?
Yes, many Japanese companies as well as Asian companies are very much interested in enlarging and deepening their investment in this region. And I visited some Gulf countries last year as a special advisor to the Prime Minister at that time. I was in charge of national security affairs. And I visited several countries in this region, and many of the region of the Gulf countries, they are all producing countries, are really interested in renewable energy. I was really surprised. They are so rich in oil and mineral resources, natural gas, but they are still seeking the renewable renewable energy apparatus. For instance, in Egypt, in Zafarana, there is a project supported by our government, official development aid. The wind power station is going to be established. And by doing so, the so-called Kyoto mechanism, by using the Kyoto mechanism, the CDM, the gas, will be bought by our government, Japan, and make our Kyoto Protocol target be accomplished by using this kind of investment, or how can I say, the win-win project in this region. So, since it is said that the oil reserves will last in 30 years. It is said since 30 years. And by the technological innovation, maybe we can use the reserved oil much longer than expected. But there should be a limit someday. Maybe not in this century, but next century, nobody knows. So to utilize these precious natural resources in this region is a common treasure and should be used wisely and effectively. Japan would like to support to use those natural resources in this region as effective as possible and keep our globe much cooler, and would like to achieve our global objectives, that is to halve the CO2 emissions by half by 2050. That was decided last year in Heiligendamm Summit. For your information, this year's G8 Summit will be hosted by Japan in Hokkaido, Toyako Lake. So global warming is one of the common field that Japan and the Middle East countries can share and make good role models.
Thank you very much. If I understand you. Yeah. understand you're right. We will need a lot of energy in the years to come anyway, and what we can't cover with renewables, we still have to use the fossil fuel, but in the most cost-effective manner with the most modern technology, and there Japan would like to contribute also. Mr. Janahi, you are a seasoned businessman also, then leading one of the most important banks in the region, Islamic Bank, and listening to this conversation about where the Middle East is now going with the potential recession in the US, but still quite good growth figures here. What is your perspective for the 5 coming years, and also for those countries that are now accumulating a lot of capital into sovereign wealth funds that can be invested other places, and even in the Middle East, of course?
Thank you very much. Before I start, I love your Pharaonic accent. It's beautiful. I've been trying it for 25 years with no luck. Before I answer that, actually, I'd like to come back to what President Bush was saying. I had prepared 5 pages here in my pocket. It's back in my pocket. Now I cannot say what I wanted to say because I'm conflicted, because he brought my namesake into his speech, Abdulla-Janahi, who is a family member. It's great to hear that name, because actually that is, I like to talk about successes before I really go into the point that you are raising. Success such as Abdulla-Janahi in a place in a small country like Bahrain with this young democracy that we have, it's a fantastic story to tell. But we need tens of thousands of those to be created. We need to create the entrepreneurship mindset in our part of the world, and the leaders have to push that to go forward. So it's great to hear it from President Bush. I wish we could have heard it from other people from our part of the world rather than hearing it from someone from outside. So it's very important to push for that.
But you just, excuse me, sir, you're saying that you want to strengthen innovation and entrepreneurship. You heard your colleague, Mr. Alshaya, underline that you need more effective bureaucracies and governments and less government in this part of the world. Do you agree on that?
I'll come back to, Mohammed actually said something about our governments today are over-bureaucratic, they need to reduce. I don't think it's a question of the should. If they're going to survive, they must reduce. They must become much more pragmatic. The theme of this 2 or 48 hours is basically looking into the future, learning from the future and going forward. If we're going to do that, I would say today I'm a layman businessman. That's the way I look at myself, not a seasoned businessman. And just looking at things around us, I think the only way we go forward is these governments have to reduce for them to survive, in order that's going to be transparency, in order that's going to be security in our part of the world. And we need to allow the people to come up. Leaders must listen. Leaders must listen to the people in order that we go forward. The only way we will go forward, the only way we will make changes, if the leaders start listening to the people coming up. President Bush said something about the issue of democracy. Democracy is a very important factor, and democracy in all its shapes, regardless if it's homegrown or being pushed from outside, I think it's an important factor. The only way we learn, and democracy has its problems. It's going to take time in certain countries, but eventually the sound, the voice of the people has to be heard, and that's the only way we're going to improve. That's the only way I personally believe entrepreneurship can start, because if you don't have the voice of the people being allowed to be heard by the powers, no way we're going to start really having Abdulla-Janahi's left, right, and center, creating millions of those in our part of the world. I think that's a very, very important thing to look at. I think when you talk about what is the outlook for the next 5 years, unfortunately, we should look 25 years ago where we were, where we are today. Did we learn from the future 25 years ago? I always look at the best years of the life that I've had throughout since I've been born. In the Arab world, it's been 73 to 75. Those, I would say, they were the jewel years for us as Arabs. When 73, the Arabs won the war, and the oil prices went up. There was a bit of things starting there. There was hope in the Arab world that things will happen. But since 75 until today, we've been only going through problems. King Abdullah mentioned that Palestinian issue has been used by radicals, has been used by extremists as a way to enlighten and to create problems that we have. I would turn it actually a bit more on the other side, that even the leaders have used the Palestinian issue for a way for them not to basically create the atmosphere, the environment that I'm talking about in order to create the entrepreneurship and create equal opportunities for the people. So it's not only bottom-up, not only radicals have used it, even the leaders, the rulers in our part of the world, they've used the Palestinian issue for their sake of stability from their perspective. So I think it's important not to hijack the Palestinian issue, not just from radicals, even from the leaders and the rulers in our part of the world, and actually the West. I mean, when President Bush talks about that two-state solution is going to happen by 2008, we all love to have that. But to be honest, from what we've seen in the past, and we've learned from the past, that's a dream, that's not going to happen. But we love it to happen. I'd like to be proven wrong. I'm sure every single person sitting in this hall here would like that to be proven wrong, that we will have a Palestinian state in the next. I think the way I would look at it is that 7 years ago until today, the wealth in terms of the oil prices going up, there's been a lot of wealth created, but what do we see in the Arab world? We see across the board, the oil-based countries and non-oil-based countries, the gap between rich and poor has widened so much is widened that we've even actually, the small little middle class that we had, we're trying to eliminate it. Mohammed Alshaya, what he's trying to do, and the likes of Mohammed Alshaya, trying to create or recreate the middle class, but we have killed the middle class. So we need to concentrate on the middle class side. And I always use Turkey as a fantastic example. It's the other way around. Turkey 7 years ago truly did not have middle class. The new government came in, elected government, and look what they've done in the past 7 years. The gap, yes, the rich has gone much richer, but the poor has come up, and there is a middle class in Turkey today, has been a success story, and we should not, I repeat, basically always say Islam is a cause of problems. Matter of fact, Turkey is an Islamic country, and the government in Turkey is supposed to be an Islamic moderate party. So I think it's important not to lose track of the good examples that we have around us. So where do we see going in the future? We have chances. FDI in our part of the world, Prince Andrew spoke about FDI. FDI in our part of the world is growing. But when you look, say in the Gulf, Dubai is a very good example. It's $24 billion last year. But majority of $24 billion invested, and it's good, is coming from Saudi Arabia and from Kuwait. Most of it is coming from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And that's good news, because this time we should use and utilize the wealth in those parts of the world, apart from supporting other countries like Yemen, like Jordan, other countries, and Egypt and the rest. I think it's very important that to build the infrastructure in the countries that we have. Certain countries which are very rich in oil, they don't have proper sewage systems, for God's sake. So it's very, very important that we invest in the infrastructure, be it physical, and I would say the infrastructure, something again mentioned by King Abdullah and President Bush, education. Our investment for the future is education. If we're going to achieve anything in the future, is basically we have to give everything into education, and we have to accept as leaders that we have to give something away for a brighter future for our people.
Thank you very much, and thank you much for sharing this with us. Also focusing on entrepreneurship and innovation, and what's more natural than turning to Jimmy Wales, the initiator of Wikipedia. We used to have Encyclopedia Britannica, and now we have Wikipedia. And you have seen a lot of technology changes the last decade, but you're probably going to see the same things happening also in the coming decade. And what kind of implications do you think these changes will have for the Middle East and for the world, the changes that we are going to see also in the years to come?
So I think one of the main things that I see when we look at the impact of the internet and internet technologies over the next 10 years is to realize that right now we have about 1 billion people online by some estimates, and in the next 5 to 10 years we're going to have the next billion people coming online, and they're not going to be coming online from the US and Europe and Japan because we're mostly already online. They're going to be coming online from China, India, the Middle East, Africa, South America, and we're going to have a much broader participation from a lot of different kinds of people. The interesting thing about this, I think, for the Middle East is that in terms of the idea that people have about the Middle East around the world, a lot of what people hear about is the extremes, the extremists. We hear about the problems, we hear about conflict. Those are the things that make the nightly news. But what we don't hear from is ordinary day-to-day people. And this is one of the amazing things about the internet, is that in really empowers a flourishing of ordinary people communicating with each other and broadly to the world. Right now, for example, Wikipedia is, we have over 150 languages that have at least 1,000 articles. So, while 1,000 articles is not much of an encyclopedia, but we've got about 40 to 50 languages that are actually pretty good size, large active projects. And that's just going to continue to expand all around the world. Right now, in Arabic Wikipedia, for example, I checked this morning, there were 59,512 articles. I'm sure there's more than that by now because people are always writing and adding more things every day. We would consider that a medium-sized project. It's actually, it's small compared to the total population of Arabic speakers, but it's actually not unusual. It's in line considering the total number of people who are online and literacy and all the other measures. It's not an outlier. It's pretty normal. But all those people are going to come online. They're coming online, more and more every day as the technology gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. More and more people have access. And so now we're going to have a new form of media. This new form of media, this mass collaboration, peer production, participatory media has already had a huge impact in the U.S. and Europe and other places around the world. And it's going to have the same kind of impact in the Middle East. It's going to really change a lot of the political dynamics, I think.
Thank you very much. If Mr. Jimmy Wales is Mr. Wikipedia, I think Mr. Paul Rice is probably then Mr. Fair Trade. Mr. Rice is also a Schwab Schwab Foundation social entrepreneur and has been doing a lot in the fair trade sector. And listening to this discussion, sustainable development is definitely important. Speaking about climate change, water scarcity, rising food prices. How can social entrepreneurs play an even more important role in securing sustainable development?
Great question.
Thanks.
I'd like to start, first of all, just by thanking Klaus and Hilde Schwab for your visionary support of social entrepreneurs. And
Hilde is here.
And I'd like to thank the people of Egypt for the warm welcome that you've shown us this weekend. So, it seems to me that on one level, globalization has worked quite well, right? At the macro level, if you look at the numbers, the globalization has led to a dramatic increase in trade around the world and economic growth as well. In all of the regions of the world, economic growth has come as a result of increased trade flows. And yet if you dig a little deeper and you look at the benefits of globalization and where they're going, it's quite clear that vast sectors of the global population are being left behind. Right? So we still have 2 billion people in the world that are living on $2 a day or less. And when we think of the Middle East and the tremendous oil revenues, perhaps sometimes we tend to forget that this reality exists here in the Middle East as well. According to the World Bank, 24% of the population in the Middle East lives on $2 a day or less. So the question of poverty and what to do about it. I think the old prescription was a top-down prescription. So we attack poverty by looking to government, looking to multilateral and bilateral aid agencies, looking to NGOs, and we send money, and it's a very vertical model. And I've spent much of my adult career working with farmers in very remote villages in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, and my own experience is that this model is not very effective. The top-down model is not very effective. So, I think the challenge for us now is to look for new models that can address poverty and hunger and marginalization and environmental degradation as well. And then we have to look for models at the grassroots. We have to look for a bottom-up approach. And I think that's what social entrepreneurs do quite well. You might be wondering, what's a social entrepreneur? And there are lots of definitions out there. I think a social entrepreneur is kind of a cross between a Don Quixote dreamer, a tenacious warrior, and a bit of a mad scientist cooking up crazy formulas in the laboratory. Social entrepreneurs essentially take innovative, market-based approaches to social and environmental problems. So they're looking for sustainable approaches that harness the power of partnerships, that harness the power of markets to the task of solving old problems. And
do we have concrete examples in
absolutely, yeah. Here in the region, we have a number of social entrepreneurs that have been very successful. For example, the Abdulla-Janahi family, the Sekem, which is a renowned organic biodynamic farm that has been very successful at raising agricultural products, organic agricultural products, and selling them not only here in Egypt but also to Europe and North America. And it's a profitable farm, it's an environmentally sustainable farm, but more importantly, or equally importantly, it creates a revenue stream that allows the surrounding farming communities to enjoy much greater health and educational indicators. So it's both profitable and socially responsible and sustainable at the same time. You have Injaz in Jordan that has forged creative partnerships between the business community and high schools in order for high school students to develop entrepreneurial skills and develop their self-confidence. So we heard about the problem of unemployment and all of the youth in the Middle East that are looking for jobs. Well, they can either sit back and wait for the jobs to come to them, or they can develop the skills to go out and create their own businesses and form their own jobs. And that's another example of a social enterprise in Jazz that is promoting this kind of formula.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting that a lot of the panel has underlined the importance of fighting poverty in this region. Mr. Janahi also underlined that the difficult situation in Palestine should not be an excuse for politicians on both sides to implement the right new structural changes. Mr. Janahi, have you seen a different attitude lately from leading governmental figures in the Middle East in fighting poverty and introducing new policy here? And do the wealth that you see coming out of the rising oil prices in this region, are these resources allocated in an optimal way on education and poverty alleviation?
I think that was a long two questions, and the answer to both is no. I think Paul actually did mention the issue of top-down is not going to work. What we see in the Arab world today, yes, everybody is recognizing, because of the food security, the way the food is going, the price is going up, the commodity is just pushing up, is that it's creating a problem in all the countries in the Arab world. And what's happening from a solution perspective, across the board, there are some exceptions, but across the board, when you look at the solution is basically top-down, subsidy. And as soon as you start doing subsidy, is basically what is happening is that the regime is looking at itself rather than looking at actually elevating the people. You need to elevate the people, you need to invest. You mentioned your first question, and I purposely do not answer, but unfortunately I have to now, when you spoke about sovereign wealth funds. I don't believe we really have sovereign wealth fund. Maybe in one or two countries, yes. Most of it I would look at as a private wealth fund, specifically in the Gulf. But investing in Citibank or investing in Merrill Lynch or investing in UBS, with all due respect, is not going to give the future of this part of the world anything what Paul was talking about, because social entrepreneurship starts not just from bottom up, it has to come from the middle too. So I think it's very important that we look at our own and we invest in our own people. And I do not see that happening. It's bad news. I'm sorry to be pessimistic about it, but that's the reality on the ground, is that we basically solving the issue of the commodity high prices through subsidies. We're not doing anything proper about it. We're not doing anything I would call strategic about it for the future.
So, Mr. Alshaya, you are in the consumer business. We're not doing anything strategic about it. Do you agree on that one? And also, do you agree with your friend Serge when saying we're seeing a lot of private wealth funds in the Middle East? But the first one is about subsidies.
We have recently, I want to give you an example of government and private working together. A month ago, I was paying a visit to the Minister of Labor of Saudi Arabia, Dr. Ghazi Al-Ghusaybi. And I am very proud to say that we have come out of the discussion that we will improve or increase our employment of women in Saudi Arabia. We have right now over 40 women working for us. And we, with the Swedish company H&M, we are embarking on an initiative to develop stores with women working in the H&M concept. We'll have challenges. We'll have, but we have to do it, and we have this initiative as one of our social responsibility toward women in Saudi Arabia.
Ms. Koike, it's good to turn to you. Can you see the same future when it comes to wealth creation in this part of the world as Japan has been enjoying from the 60s and until late 80s?
Yeah, I wanted to add my opinion,
Yep.
I mean, the comment on that, the food price hike.
Okay, let's start there.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Because President Mubarak has mentioned about it in his speech, and I don't remember word by word, but he said, the President Mubarak said the food and energy relation should be re-estimated.
He was quite critical of this growth in biofuels, wasn't he?
Yes, that's right. And I do agree his opinion, the President Mubarak's opinion, because I believe that it is so important to, how can I say, to formulate international rules governing the development of bioethanol urgently, such as by making distinctions between food and energy resources. In Japan now, the rice straw, which is only to throw it, or burn it, but burning the rice straw is forbidden by our law. So it's only to how can I say, to throw it, to waste it. But from using this rice straw and squeeze it to make it bioethanol, I think this is okay because it's not edible. I mean, the rice straw itself cannot be eaten. So this kind of technological innovation is useful for us. But eating food, I mean, eating corns or just the sugar canes, it is violating the field of food, and that make a big confusion in the world today. Do you remember the Greek mythology called Midas touch? The king Midas, he got the ability from the god. When whatever he touches, he has enough gold already. Anything he touches turns to be gold. Even bread, meat, butter, a glass of water turn to be gold. As a politician, I want to be the Midas, Queen Midas. But he couldn't eat anything and couldn't keep alive. So bioethanol is just like Midas touch. So we have to rethink again right now and make apparent distinction in between the food and energy. Otherwise, we cannot be, our world will not be sustainable. Thank you.
Paul, just a short comment on that from your side?
Well, I believe that food security is critical right now. We've seen that with commodity prices, and food security is intimately linked to this notion of development from the ground up. So I would argue that if you look at the cooperative movements around the world, if you look at village self-help movements, and in many, many countries, including right here in Egypt, what you'll find is communities coming together to strengthen food security through greater access to technologies, appropriate technologies, and then through greater market access. And I think market access is so critical for small rural communities in order to be able to create a process of sustainable development and revenue generation and livelihoods.
Turning back to this discussion, Your Royal Highness, about enhancing innovation and also entrepreneurship. Listening to the discussion, do you have any input from your side on that?
I was interested that there's a view that there is a difference between social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. I think that the two things are two sides of the same coin. And I think that we heard the King of Jordan talk about corporate social responsibility. I think a large number of people do see corporate social responsibility as a charitable activity, when actually it should be seen as something that is creating sustainable growth and sustainable ability for people to actually do things. Yes, if you get globalization, if you have large percentages of growth, then yes, you are going to get an increasing disparity between the wealth brackets. And actually what we want to be able to do is to create the conditions whereby social entrepreneurship can keep pace with entrepreneurship. Because there's always going to be somebody who falls between the cracks or falls below the level of what have you classified as $2 a day. I mean, in 2 or 3 years' time, it may be $5 a day. But we also have to be mindful of actually what does that $2 buy you in your various nations. So I think that there's a lot more to this than just a divide. But I agree with you that we do need to be more careful about food production when you take into consideration bioethanol. Sometimes there are things that we are doing that perhaps might exacerbate a reduction in food production that we need to be careful about. We also need to be mindful of, if you do grow crops for, particularly in Brazil, if you grow crops for bioethanol production, you're displacing livestock into the rainforest, and if you do that, that means that the rainforest is going to come down, which means that actually that you then have a virtuous circle, which means that if you have less rain on the plains of Brazil, which is where it's going to affect, you're not actually going to be able to grow the bioethanol in the first place. It's a problem, and it's all a balance, and I think that we have to think very, very carefully.
Jimmy Wales, we're speaking here about also innovation in the Middle East, broader sustainable development issues, corporate social responsibility. We know that, as you also underlined, you also set up an Arabic Wikipedia. How would you like to do more investments and develop your business in the Middle East? And what are important for you looking at future investments in the Middle East for being willing to do even more here?
Well, I think that, speaking in general, the general principles of what's attractive to business and innovation and entrepreneurship are pretty straightforward. When you have very complicated red tape that doesn't serve a lot of purpose, making it very hard for young people to innovate in a new business, things like this, it's a real problem. And one of the great successes of innovation has been Silicon Valley venture capital model, in which people are rewarded for taking risks. Capital is available for anyone with a good idea, but it's also really, really easy for people to get started. And when you don't have that kind of a business environment and business culture, it stifles innovation from the very beginning, from some of the most unexpected places. Wikipedia, I was sitting at home in my pajamas like everybody else typing on the internet, and I was a futures and options trader. I wouldn't have been a person who you would have thought would have launched this kind of initiative, but I did because it was really easy to do. And I think that's something that really needs to be examined and is really about that kind of grassroots approach to building a broader economic base beyond oil for the long run. So I think for me, that's the most important thing is try and get the government out of the way as much as possible.
Producing higher up in the value chain also is what you're saying. Mr. Janahi, it seems like you agree on this message.
I certainly do. I think that's, if we're going to create, when we talk about the future and we're going to create entrepreneurship, the only way you're going to do it is to create basically the environment for it. You've got to create the money aspect has to be there. We have to have venture capitalists. So the mindset has to change altogether. The law, it's very important. The legal redress in our part of the world across the board needs a lot of elevation. Than certain countries much better than others, but needs a lot of elevation because you cannot do what you're talking about in Silicon Valley if the legal redress is not proper. So a lot of that is required. But I would like to have actually certain successes. I mean, I've always, unfortunately, I do sound that I'm being pessimistic, but we do have successes. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid last year launched the foundation in actually Dead Sea at the Middle East meeting of the World Economic Forum of his $10 billion foundation. He put an endowment of 10 billion on that. But I think as Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid, looking at the past 25 or 30 years in Dubai, every 5 years you hear the same story from everybody who was outside that play, who was Mohammed bin Rashid, saying, this is basically going to drop. It's 2 or 3 years, Dubai is going to drop, something is going to go wrong because it doesn't make sense. The formula does not make sense. And this person has proved everybody wrong. And Dubai has just been improving ongoing basis. People today talk again, the current story in Dubai is that, with the subprime problems, the banks have liquidity issues, the big banks, and with the debt that Dubai has, there's going to be a squeeze on Dubai. But as a banker, I'll tell you one thing, I lend you little money, I own you. I lend you a lot of money, you own me. And what's happening is Dubai owns all the big banks. There's no way the big banks can do anything with Dubai. So Dubai can only go forward. So if there is a success story, and that's a problem that we have, forget the leaders, even in the midst of people like us, that we do not believe in successes like that. We should basically push for successes like that. We should be happy, we should be proud, and we should do more of that. So Mohammed bin Rashid, if anything, is a success entrepreneur with mindset. Yes, people will say country was, or the emirate was 50,000 people 25 years ago. Today is 3.5 million people, so it's lost its identity. It's created a new identity. I think let's always look at the positive side rather than negative side. So take that in.
Thank you very much. I think that's really excellent summing up of all this good session. It's been about education. It's been about having more effective governments, less red tape. It has been about also incorporating sustainable development, corporate social responsibility when one are doing business in the Middle East. Also about producing higher up in the value chain. Using the extra oil revenues in a future-oriented way, investing in infrastructure. It has also been about fighting poverty, meeting the overall Millennium Development Goals. This is a prerequisite also for more stability in the years to come. It's also about social entrepreneurs. We need to highlight that. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that 2 coming days gives us a huge opportunity to go even deeper into these issues. This has been a curtain raiser, an appetizer, because we're going to deal with financial risks, sovereign wealth funds, sustainable development, environment. We're going to discuss water issues. We're going to discuss food prices, food crisis. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for this great panel.